You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And thanks as always for making us your first listen with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and welcome back to another Locked On Texas Tech special edition, as we're glad to be looking across the field to the other sideline once again. We're joined by Cam Stewart of Locked On Baylor. Of course, you can catch daily on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, also for a Baylor Bear breakdown as we continue to run through the Red Raider 2024 schedule. Cam, good to see you, man. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on. Always appreciate coming on these other Big 12 shows. We hateful eight as we start to expand. We hateful eight have to stick together. So I'm always here for a good butt edition of Locked On.
That's right.
There you go.
Solidarity, brother. Solidarity.
I've always said with Baylor and Tech, you know, we're not the best of friends, but we hate the same people, and I think that's what's more valuable, honestly.
That's right.
Dr. Pepper for everybody, man.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Dr. Pepper and tortillas. Let's do this.
That's
thing.
right.
Yeah, we can get into.
I love Buddy Holly, so yeah.
All right, Buddy Holly and Dr. Pepper. Let's take it back to the 50s, I guess. We can get into a little bit of the my enemy, or the enemy of my enemy is my friend today, and we'll just keep those vibes alive, I guess. But it's going to be all about the Bears today, as we're looking to get a sneak peek at what's going on in Waco. And, man, as far as this series goes, the last couple of years have been kind of hard to figure. Baylor comes to Lubbock, sold-out night at the Jones. They smack Tech around and leave with a win. And then Tech goes to Waco a season ago and does very well against Baylor to get a win there. I wanted to start it off with your head coach and Dave Aranda, a guy who I personally have always thought very highly of as a football coach, and obviously put some hardware on the shelf there in Waco early in his tenure. But I don't know if it's just a read from afar or what, but the seat seems to be approaching, I don't know, scorching hot. Is that an exaggeration, or what's the temperature around the head coach heading into the year?
Oh, man, you've been on a turf football field the first day of practice for high school football on August 1st. That's about what it's like at 5 in the afternoon. That's about what Dave Aranda's seat is like. And you guys are not wrong in thinking that. It was a shock to most of us that Mac Rose stuck with him at the end of last year. I get the reasoning. It wouldn't have been solid enough for me as an athletic director to keep him around. But I think there has been winning the offseason kind of mentality, which if it happens with your team, you're like, yay. Everyone else that says that, you're like, these guys think they won the offseason kind of thing. What does that mean? And so it's a hot seat. I wouldn't be surprised if it's another slow start out of the gate. That could spell danger for Dave Aranda. I kind of link it to what it was like for Scott Frost at Nebraska a few years ago, where it was like, really, we're sticking with this dude, and then a month into the season, you're punting on it because you're firing your head coach. That's still on the table. I like the additions he's made on his coaching staff in particular, but yeah, it's a hot seat. It was a hot seat last year. I didn't expect the seat to still be around for him this time of year, but here we go.
And you know, Cam, is that fair? It's a here and now society. I mean, there's a lot less patience out there. I mean, they're the old Big 12 championship. That's
pretty good. That was pretty fun.
Good. Yeah. And I know the counter is like, well, that was with Matt Rule's guys. I understand that, but it's not just too far back when the guy, I mean, it's a pretty good year. Or are you surprised that it kind of dipped as quick? I mean, just kind of take me through the dynamic of Coach Aranda, and we were here, now we're here, and we're not sure where we are. And is that just kind of take me through that dynamic?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with this in that I was actually saying this to a friend the other night. It almost seems taboo to say now around Baylor people, but like, we want the Dave Aranda thing to work. Like we like Dave Aranda. He could be frustrating to cut up a 30-second soundbite because he just goes on and on, but we really like Aranda. We want this style to work. That's why it was a lot of fun in 2021. This maniacal football sicko genius, but he's very, tempered out there on the field and everything. Like we like that. We hope it's successful. I think to get back to the original point of, hey, isn't this a bit too quick? I think 10, 15 years ago, it would have been like, yeah, let's pump the brakes, give him some more time. And to your point, now it's not like that in all sports, college or pro, right? It's a very win now mentality. And I get that. I would say to the Dave Aranda point of has it been too quick? The only reason I didn't think so was because it almost feels like things have gotten worse the more control he's gotten, right? So back to the point of the 21 team being Matt Rule's guys, that's absolutely true. I don't necessarily hold that against him. They were guys who had played a lot of games. You think of the Terrell Bernards and the Jalen Petries, Defensive Player of the Year that year. JT Woods, Gary Bohannon had waited his turn to play at quarterback. These guys had played a lot of games at the Division I Big 12 level. What those guys needed was a coach who was going to perfect the little things, almost like an NFL team would. And that's why it really worked. Now you start to get Aranda's guys in through the door, or guys who hadn't had as many reps in practice, and you're starting to use your tools to build your kind of program. That's when things have taken a landslide. I mean, we're talking about a 9-16 the last 2 years since winning that Sugar Bowl. So it's kind of a convoluted answer there. Was it too quick? In most cases, yeah, I would be like, let's be a little more patient. But what I'm waiting for is really some positive signs of Dave Aranda, the program taskmaster, rather than Dave Aranda, the football coach, because we've seen the good at Dave Aranda as the football coach. I still believe it's there, but in terms of overall running this program, it's gone south the last few years.
It's also a completely different sport than it was 2 or 3 years ago.
It's true.
Yeah. As he said at media days,
right.
What are we good at? We pay our guys.
Like, that helps a lot.
That's right. Sorry, Calvin, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's all good. That was one of the best answers from Big 12 Media Days, certainly. I don't know if anything compares with Mike Gundy, but nonetheless was a memorable answer, to say the least. I'm kind of curious, the urgency. I know urgency is always there within college sports. The arms race is always ongoing. I know Chris and I understand what we feel up in Lubbock and wherever Red Raider fans may be as far as the urgency to succeed now as it relates to conference realignment, the new Big 12, an opportunity that is there, and whatever the future could hold. Do you think, is that true for Baylor fans as well? It adds another layer of urgency. Like, we really got to show out during this time, because you kind of feel like you're sort of on the runway as a program and looking for whatever, again, that future may hold, to really be in your, I guess, best shape or give your best showing, put your best foot forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely, it's that same case for Baylor fans in that the boogeymen are gone. There's no UT or OU and their varying levels of competition the last few years, right? It's not like they were running the conference, as it were, the last few years, but they're gone. And that opens up a window for long-term success in this conference. And when the first expansion talks had started, that was 2 summers ago. That was right after Baylor had that great season under Aranda, where they won the Big 12 and won the Sugar Bowl. A lot of us were thinking, this is our shot. This is coming at the perfect time. We're about to enter into a great era of parity in this conference without Texas and OU in the picture. And it's not crazy to think Baylor, that the Big 12 could be sustainable, and that Baylor could be a team that's up at the top of the football rankings in the Big 12 for years to come. And I'm sure that's a conversation around Tech with bringing in Joey McGuire around the same time. I know after that first season in 2022, TCU was thinking the same thing. Oklahoma State's thinking the same thing. And that's why I think it makes it a lot more disappointing to see how the last 2 seasons have gone. There's certainly an urgency there. There are still a lot of us Baylor fans who know that as great as it was in the Bryles years, and of course some isolated years afterwards, Baylor historically has not been a program that just is sustained success. I know we're on the same page here, not to throw any shade. We know that that's not an easy thing to do for schools like us, and even a TCU. That's what made the Gary Patterson era so incredible, right? So yeah, there's an urgency to be like, what are we waiting for now? Because we can't use the excuse of we can't keep up with UT and OU in terms of resources. There are very few teams in this conference that Baylor and TCU and Tech can't keep up with, can't even get in the same ballpark for in terms of resources.
You mentioned that you liked a lot of the coaching changes. That's a huge storyline. There are a lot of changes, especially with a lot of the key roles there on Coach Aranda's staff. Tech played Cal in a bowl game in Shreveport, and they played a Cal team that had no offensive coordinator because he was moving his stuff to Waco at the time. Jake Spavital, I'm curious what your thoughts were there, because he's got a lot of ties to a lot of people in the Big 12. I mean, spent time at West Virginia, was a GA at Oklahoma State years ago. He's worked for Sonny Dykes and all that. He's very familiar with this. He spent a lot of time at Texas A&M. But take me through what a Jake Spavital offense looks like as opposed to a lot of that wide zone that we were seeing over the last several years.
First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and keep that ride or die ride on the road, or elevate your car's game to the next level of performance. Superchargers, exhaust kits, LED headlights, roof racks, and accessories of all kinds to fit your style. Whether it's power, speed, or design you're into, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to perfectly fit what you need. Just head over to ebay.com/motors now, where you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and at no risk because of eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit just right every time, or your money back, keeping you burning rubber and not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your ride or die on the road and moving your life forward at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply.
Jake Spavital, I'm curious what your thoughts were there, because he's got a lot of ties to a lot of people in the Big 12. I mean, spent time at West Virginia, was a GA at Oklahoma State years ago. He's worked for Sonny Dykes and all that. He's very familiar with this. He spent a lot of time at Texas A&M. But take me through what a Jake Spavital offense looks like as opposed to a lot of that wide zone that we were seeing over the last several years.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it looks like in simplest terms. It looks a heck of a lot better than what we were throwing out there last year. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I am a Jeff Grimes apologist. I don't throw it all on him. But this is a more exciting offense. It's one that kids really want to play. And it's very similar to the one that Baylor had in its most successful stretch in football. I mean, I was on the Spavital train from the beginning in terms of they were looking for a guy who had been a head coach, and technically Jake Spavital was a head coach at Texas State. It didn't go very well, but he was a head coach, and looking for a guy like that who obviously has an emphasis on the passing game. And that's where you have it. He was at Cal the second time this last year, and he brought them up by, I think it was like 8 or 10 points a game. And they went from the bottom of the barrel in terms of rushing offense, which is where Baylor was at in the Big 12 last year, to the top half of what was a competitive Pac-12 conference last year. To make those strides that he did in 1 year at Cal was amazing. I mean, we're talking about a Pac-12 doormat in Cal. People don't even show up to the games there. And he has, obviously, his track record speaks for itself. It's kind of funny that I'll say it on this show, because the names I usually bring up, I'm like, look at the guys he's worked with. Johnny Manziel, Kyler Murray, Case Keenum. And I always inevitably come back to Davis Webb, who I'm like, Davis Webb had a good college career. Like, trust me, and he's still bouncing around in pro football. Like that. Everywhere he has gone, he has elevated his team's offense and especially elevated the quarterback position, and not only built good college quarterbacks, but guys who had good pro careers as well. Guys who you wouldn't think, like a Davis Webb, that would hang around in the NFL, and he has. And Case Keenum hangs around in the NFL. And Kyler Murray, obviously #1 pick in the draft. Manziel, not as much. But, the track record speaks for itself. And you can already feel the excitement in terms of on the recruiting trail, especially for kids that want to play in this style of offense. And it's not something that, they're not going to average 55 points a game this year. It's going to be a learning curve. It took a couple of years when Art Briles got here to get that offense in gear. But I think it's as simple as looking at Baylor's been playing football for 120 years, and they've really had one decade of sustained success. What were they doing then? And it still works in today's game. It wasn't that long ago.
Well, I'm really curious on the offensive side of the football. I think one of the more interesting storylines has to be what's going on with the quarterback competition. I know he was asked about that, and I think just outright said, I don't know. We're going to get into camp, and we're going to find out. The Shapen era is over. You've got one of the more intriguing transfers, I think, in the Big 12, in a Toledo transfer, who I believe was the MAC Player of the Year. And then you've got a guy that's familiar to us up in the 806 and Sawyer Robertson. So how do you see this kind of breaking down, and what are some of the differences that you might point out between those guys?
Yeah, well, I'll say in terms of, like, we would all love to have an answer at who the quarterback is, right? And I have a hunch the coaching staff probably has a good hunch who they're going with, and we'll probably know a week or two into fall camp and probably won't announce it till the week of the game. So we all want to know that, right? But I think weirdly enough, even though it was not a good offense last year and one of the guys is new, I think Baylor's in a pretty good spot at quarterback. What is going to be a really good quarterback conference this year. It's going to feel like 7 or 8 years ago in the Big 12. So I'm not thinking they're going to be an all Big 12 caliber, signal caller, but you've got two pretty good options back there. I love the Daquan Finn one. That was one that I was on early. Didn't think Baylor had a shot at him because he's a Detroit area kid and he had some Big 10 schools looking for him. There we go. And so I was thinking, that might not be, he might not even give Baylor a real look. And he did. This is a guy who, again, group of 5 in the MAC, but was the MAC Player of the Year, led them to 2 MAC championship games, won one of them. So we know the production at a Division I level, and the comparisons have been terrific. We heard comparisons from coaches out of the spring finale. Hey, it looks a lot like Trevon Boykin. And I'm like, well, that's not a bad comp to have in this conference to look like Trevon Boykin. And he's a guy who is a scrambler like Boykin was, can extend the play, still has a pretty good deep ball from what we saw at Toledo and what we've seen in the clips from spring practice. So take that with a grain of salt, but can do a little bit of both and kind of adds that element that Baylor hasn't had or did not have with Blake Shapen. And Dave Aranda's called him this. He's an 11th guy you've got to cover. You've got to game plan for. That's another element that Baylor just didn't have with Shapen. And in contrast, Sawyer Robertson, finally, this is the kind of offense he's used to. This is the offense similar to what Seth Parr ran in high school for him, and obviously what he got recruited for at Mississippi State for Mike Leach. It's close to that Hal Mummy style of offense. And so when he came into the wide zone, I was like, that doesn't seem like a fit. Hopefully it is, because he turns out to be one of the highest graded high school guys that they've ever had at quarterback. And I think this is a much better fit for him. Those timing routes, that touch on a deep ball, which just wasn't incorporated into the offense last year. That's a big part of it now. And I was saying this actually on my show last week of, if Sawyer Robertson is the starting quarterback, that's not a bad thing. That means he has earned the job. Probably not that Daquan Finn relinquished the job. It's probably that Sawyer Robertson went out there and earned it. And whether he's the starter or not this year, he's certainly the starter incumbent for 2025. And I love the growth that he had in that season last year. He got a couple of starts at the beginning of the year, one start at the end, and he looked leagues different. So I think this is going to fit into more his style of play. And that's why I think you got 2 pretty decent options here for a team that was 3-9 last year.
Cam and Coach Aranda, I think with a lot of the coaching changes, he's basically kind of said, Cliff Kingsbury did this, several years ago here, where he's like, man, I'm just not going to tinker with the offense, not going to mess with it. I'm going to focus on what I do, what I'm known for. I'm going to fix this defense and really spend my time. I mean, explain that role and kind of how much has shifted on where he spends his time on that side of the ball, and then just take us through the defense real fast.
Yeah. We like to call that a last ditch, by the way, of, hey, I'm just going to stay in my lane over here. I'm going to keep my hands on the defense, things like that. So I love the move because like this was the next best move for me. If you weren't going to fire him was, okay, now we're showing a belief in this guy because he is still one of the great defensive minds. Like that doesn't get taken away. You look at his numbers as defensive coordinator, specifically at Wisconsin and LSU, and it's mind-bottlingly good. He had top 10 defenses, I think 5 of the 6 years between those two stops, and obviously culminating in a national championship in 2019 with LSU. So I love that. I love him getting hands-on with the defense. This is what he does. And I think that's a big reason why they went for the route of, we want a guy to coach the offense, coordinate the offense, who was a head coach. It doesn't mean, hey, this is our guy in place in case you don't get your crap together in the first month of the season, but more of, this guy can handle it. He knows how to handle it at this level at Division I. He can command the room and run it with his position coaches. You just worry about the defense. And I think what's been nice about that is hearing from recruits who are saying, man, I love that Dave Aranda's running this defense. We see his resume. We know that. And look, I don't expect recruits to say, boy, I hate that Dave Aranda's running the defense, but they've mentioned him by name and said, we love that Coach Aranda is really involved in everything on the defensive side of things. Some of them saw that in spring practices and at the spring finale of he's really involved. He's used the term pissed off. He has used that a few times of getting actually animated and angry with his players and just being able to focus on those details. Because I kind of touched on it earlier. His approach to this reminds me a lot more of an NFL coach. It seems a lot different than an approach from Joey McGuire, right? And not that either one of those are bad, but he brings it into a very analytical sense, very detail-oriented sense. And to me, that's what makes a great coordinator and sometimes doesn't make for a great head coach, especially in college. And so for him to be able to live in that, inside those details and the perfectionism, I think that serves Baylor a lot better than him trying to kind of keep one finger on everything going on, keeping more a hand and a half on defense. I think is a better situation for the whole program.
Visiting with Cam Stewart of Locked On Baylor. Find him on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts daily. Before we let you go, let's stick defensively and talk about some of the personnel, because it's been pretty interesting to kind of read up on what's going on that side of the ball with, some talented pieces. Like there's a freshman All-American cornerback. You got a 6-year linebacker that's seen a ton of football, but then you lose some impact up front, whether it was graduation or some medically induced retirements. I think also a part of that story.
One. Yeah. We just had another one. Yeah.
We know that Dave Aranda can run a defense, but we also know Jimmys and Joes make it go as opposed to the X's and O's. So where does it kind of stand with the guys on the field? Is it a young defense, an experienced defense, all of the above? What do you think?
Yeah, can I take a little bit of both there? Young,
Sure.
Young, and a little bit experienced. They played a lot of freshmen last year, especially in that defensive backfield. So they're still young guys, but they're better equipped than a lot of sophomores are. And Caden Jenkins, one of the freshman All-American out there, just an absolute ball hawk. The defensive backfield is the one that I probably the unit I feel the best about on the whole team. They are still young, but they showed a lot of promise last year and kept them in some games last year. And I love that experience of Matt Jones in the middle, that 6-year linebacker, mojo guy, a little bit south of Lubbock there. And they brought in a JUCO transfer that I really love at the linebacker position in Keaton Thomas. He's out there in Vegas for media days. He was an absolute machine at the JUCO level last year. He had 25 more tackles in 3 less games than Baylor's leading tackler. So the dude can get around the field. I love seeing that. He was originally a West Virginia commit. So, he played a year at West Virginia. So he knows this level in this conference. So defensively, I love those units. I don't love the defensive line. It really has been kind of on a decline the last couple of years. They added 2 guys in through the transfer portal after spring camp on the defensive line who I think are going to start. And that's not a great sign. It's nothing to hold against them, but it's probably not a great sign of where you guys think you're at. I'm hoping on the flip side, the offensive line is better to be for you guys. I usually reference when I'm talking about how bad Baylor's offensive line was last year. Go look at the tech tape. It was not a pretty sight. So defensively, I think it's going to keep them in games. The only thing I would think that could kind of work to their detriment is if the offense actually works and they're out on the field a lot more than they're used to. But I love that defensive backfield. They have added to it as well. I think they added anywhere between 3 and 5 guys through the transfer portal in both cycles that are going to slot in as starters. Defensively, I think there are less question marks than offensively, especially up front on either line. But if they could get some guys to get to the quarterback every once in a while, that would feel real good.
Yeah, us too.
Yeah, I know you get it. Yeah. Cam, my last question is, schedule related. I think it's fascinating as we look at it's no longer a round robin and it's about who you don't play and all those things. I think Baylor's in a unique situation where they essentially have 10 conference games, although only 9 are going to count. But that little stretch there between playing Utah and that, because that's a non-conference game, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Pre-scheduled. Yeah. That, and you go from that, which they're on paper, the Big 12 favorite, whether we agree with it or not. And then you have to, try to tackle the triple option there at Air Force. And then you play, Shedeur Sanders in Colorado. It's kind of a fascinating, because you mentioned that about if it doesn't get off to a good start, because there's some landmines there early on. This is my point. But take us through the schedule real quick, and then who you missed that maybe you're excited about or whatever. And that's all I've got for you.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up that first month. I'm looking at it now, and that's one that I've referenced a lot. Obviously, Tarleton State. That's a win, hopefully.
It better be. Yeah.
I know. I would have said the same thing about Texas State last year, and it didn't go well. So I'm keeping the fingers crossed for now. At Utah, while maybe not a win is a good barometer, Air Force, it's a team that doesn't return a lot of their guys. And when you're trying to out-execute another team, that could be a big knock against you. And then Colorado, who has moved up their homecoming to this game. It was originally against Kansas State. They wanted it to be against Baylor. I can't say I blame them too much, but that's got to be bulletin board material. And then you kind of, BYU wasn't a winning team last year, but I actually think this stretch, the kind of wave after that is the one that fascinates me, and which is going to be at Iowa State, who I have as a dark horse to really compete in this conference, at Tech. No more need to be said. Homecoming against Oklahoma State, which is obviously not an easy game. And then home to TCU, who they never beat. And then at West Virginia. That is a gauntlet for this team for a month and a half there. There's the bye week mixed in there between TCU and the West Virginia game. There's so many question marks in this conference. It's why I haven't been able to really put out a definitive record prediction for this Baylor team. But I just see so many question marks there that I'm like, you could come out of this like 2-7 if it's going like it's going last year. This is where you've got to build some confidence. You got to take care of business against Tarleton, obviously, and Air Force, and hopefully Colorado, a team that was just as bad as you were really last year, just without the fanfare. And then it's those big question mark road games, Iowa State and Tech, to me, that will show. That's kind of the midpoint of the season. That's going to show what the expectations are the rest of the way, and could potentially, that could hold in the balance former Tech assistant Dave Aranda's job.
Kind of wild to have fairly early in the season a Super Bowl type matchup, as Colorado will be for everyone in the league. So maybe an easy one to get up.
I love it. Yes.
Man, we appreciate your time, dude. Enjoy your show. Also, catch Cam again on Locked On Baylor on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. It is Hateful Eight solidarity being expressed here today on the program. So appreciate your time and insight, man. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Anytime.
Thanks, Cam.
Again, that's daily on Locked On Baylor on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for joining us for another edition. Make sure you get subscribed so you never miss an episode. For Cam and Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.